Purple Daily. Meat and potatoes. Not just a deep dive. It's the deepest dive into Minnesota Vikings football.
The second episode of PDMP. Zulgad here. AJ producing and co-hosting as well. And then the star of the show, our guy, Tyler Forness, who does such a great job. The X's and O's. He and Thor are the X's and O's guys, football-wise, of Score North. And you can also find his work doing doing several Vikings posts probably a day. A to Z Sports also writes about college football. Does fantastic work. And we have breaking news as we begin to record this show because, Tyler, you sent us some some topic ideas yesterday. And the top one was Jaren Hall's possibility to make the roster and the plethora of defensive tackles that the Vikings have to choose from. Well, that was when we thought that the National Football League had passed a rule that it evidently had not. The timing is odd. I will just read from the Twitter account of Tom Pelissero, NFL Media, about what we thought and about now what's the truth. Tom writes, important note as teams construct their initial 53-man rosters. NFL teams were informed that the NFLPA vetoed the revised emergency third quarterback rule that would have allowed teams to elevate a bona fide QB from the practice squad an unlimited number of times. So the rule has now reverted, and this is one day before cuts are mandatory, to the 2023 version, which says the emergency third QB must be on the 53-man roster, not eligible to be elevated off the practice squad. Now, Forno, I had them keeping Jaren Hall regardless because he had played enough in the preseason. I didn't think that Kevin O'Connell in particular was going to want to risk trying to get him through waivers to re-sign him to the practice squad. But it was at least a discussion until now. The floor is yours.
So let's start with the timing of the rule because Score North legend, Tom Pelissero, by the way, he drops this nugget, which is fascinating. One, this is the kind of nugget you expect in May when they have the owners meetings.
Yep.
And when the competition committee really starts to kind of navigate the process. Why it's dropping just over 24 hours before final cuts are due is phenomenal content. Judd, this is the kind of stuff that we love because it gives us something to talk about. It gives us somebody to blame for what in the world is going on. There's
chaos.
Just so many layers here. It's great.
It's football chaos.
Yeah, football chaos. This is what the sports dad lives for.
Oh,
chaos.
Love chaos.
Judd, have you ever heard of the chaos grenade?
No.
Oh, it's beautiful. You just take it. Take a I think there's a GIF of it. That guy just holding a fake grenade pulls the pin out with his teeth and throws it, and it's just like chaos. That's perfect right here. So the layer here that's really interesting and I wrote about it for A to Z Sports just over an hour ago. Why Jaren Hall is now essentially a guarantee to make the roster.
Yep.
If you want a third quarterback, he's got to be on the roster. He cannot be elevated. And that was the rule that was put into place before the 2023 season. And there are rules often that are put into place on a trial basis. The kickoff this year is a trial basis. Pass interference being reviewable was a trial basis. And many others have come that are a trial basis. And to my knowledge, the third quarterback rule was also on a trial basis, but they kind of kept it, but they modified it to allow the practice squad. And the NFLPA vetoing it today is really interesting. And here's why I think it was vetoed. Quarterbacks, if you're elevated, you get a full game check. So if you have 3 accrued seasons, your vet minimum is almost $1 million. You get a prorated version of that $1 million, not your practice squad pay. So that's important. So my theory with the NFLPA is we want those quarterbacks who always get that game check. Because there are some teams who just may choose not to elevate quarterbacks. Oh, I'm playing the Carolina Panthers. It's pretty much a guaranteed win, which we know doesn't exist, but humor me here.
Right.
We're not going to elevate that guy. So that guy loses out on a game check. And they want to protect the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks is the most important position in the league. And having the third quarterback on the active roster, especially what happened to the Vikings last year, That happens to like 1 or 2 teams a year where they have to play a bunch of quarterbacks. It's good for the development of the most important position in football. And let's be real, we have some elite level quarterbacks, but quarterback is a relatively down position from where it was a decade ago when you had Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers at his peak. And you had a bunch of up and coming stars coming from that 2017 and 2018 draft class that would be able to really fortify what was leaving. Well, now you have guys leaving, and there really aren't enough players that are ready to step into those roles like we had a few years ago. Yeah, you could see something from Anthony Richardson or Will Levis this year. Maybe Bryce Young actually takes a step forward. And then this draft class looks tremendous, but we still have no idea. They're all wild cards at this point. You got to have focus on development. And guess what? Teams are going to be a lot more willing to give a guy like a Jaren Hall a chance, to give a guy like Tyson Bagent in Chicago a chance to really develop and fortify the strength of that position as a whole. So that's why I think the NFLPA did it. But yeah, guarantees that Jaren Hall is going to be on the roster.
I love this move, and here's why. It stops anyone in particular with the Vikings during cut-down discussions from trying to get cute. Now, ultimately, I think Jaren Hall makes the roster regardless of the rule because O'Connell would step in and say he's staying. But, you know, this does not... Every organization's got those jokesters. Hey, what if we do this? And then we can keep this linebacker, you know? This ends that. I love that. For the Vikings' sake, I think this is great because now it keeps you in your lane, and you had to keep... And instead of you have to keep 3, but maybe Johnny Scout comes in and says, but what about this? This eliminates any possibility. I think this is the right move. I went through it. I've done about 4 different roster constructions.
Same.
If you take Jaren Hall off, you can get somebody on, but it's not make or break. I think as far as the organizational discussions go, this to me is great because it cuts down on a discussion that I think ultimately was going to be a waste of their time. I think Jaren Hall was going to stay regardless because of the fact he's coached by a quarterback who knows that Jaren Hall's the only other guy with the team who has any idea what they're doing systematically.
Well, and it helps that Jaren Hall also played in a version of the system in college. So even coming to the NFL, there's still a learning curve. It's like I know algebra, but I'm going from algebra 1 and jumping to algebra 3.
Do you really know algebra? 'Cause I don't.
There is a gap between those things. Yep. And because there's that gap, that's why, you know, there's a learning curve, and you have that Hall showed some struggles, especially against Green Bay as a rookie. Sure. And having that year to really learn and stuff is good. But I think Hall is going to be a high level backup for this team, especially in 25 and 26, Judd, at a very, very, very low salary cap cost. You don't have to give an Andy Dalton type quarterback $8 to $10 million to come and sit and plop his butt on the bench. You have a guy who did that for years in Josh McCown as your quarterback's coach. You don't have to have that guy in the room because you already have that guy in the room. So you can afford to have a guy like Jaren Hall who has a little bit of starting experience, who you feel comfortable with if you absolutely have to put him in the game, which, in my opinion, the Vikings are in that position. And guess what? Now your quarterback room is going to be about $6 million on the cap. And now maybe instead of signing a fringe Pro Bowl defensive tackle, you sign a fringe All-Pro defensive tackle with those extra few $1 million. It can make a really, really big difference for your football team when you're talking about adding those high-end echelon players. So having Hall one more year as the third quarterback, continuing his development, because look, McCarthy's the future of this team. Nobody is arguing that fact. Having a guy like Hall in the building is good for your overall roster. So I think this is a huge win for the Vikings. Now they don't even have to think about it. It's a huge win for Hall because now instead of making the practice squad or having to move to a different state with a different team where he's learning a playbook that maybe just doesn't fit him, he gets to stay in a comfortable spot and continue his development path the way it was already constructed. I think this is just great for all parties involved.
AJ?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's really, for the Vikings, they might benefit from this more, just given the fact that he, like, to your point, Judd, he knows the playbook already, and it eliminates any type of, let's get this guy up to speed if we do need to get somebody out on the field. If everything goes terribly, and as we've seen in this preseason with joint practice and everything for the Vikings, guys get hurt. If that happens to that quarterback room, if you go tink, tink, tink right down the line, next man up, all of a sudden you need somebody to step in for a game. And Jaren Hall, he started what, 2 games, 1 game last year, and he's been now in the Viking system. He knows Kevin O'Connell's system. You don't have to teach the guy algebra and to use Forno's point there, because if we know from the head injuries in football, a lot of these guys can't even understand what algebra is. So getting a guy that's in the room, being able to keep him and go back and forth with unlimited moves, that's a huge plus for the Vikings, and they're going to hold on to some of that salary cap that they can then sprinkle elsewhere to really kind of reignite the troops.
So Tyler, take me inside now on because you made an interesting statement. I don't disagree with it, but in the meat and potatoes portion of this discussion, take me inside where you think Hall has grown. What, he's playing against backups, but he didn't play great in the first preseason game, but he did lead the drive that actually won the game. The next 2 games, I thought he played well. So what have you seen from a development standpoint? He played in 3 games a year ago, including mopping up the game against Green Bay that Cousins got hurt in. He started against the Falcons, was concussed after a nice opening drive, and then was yanked at halftime of that Packers debacle, which was a debacle for the entire team. But what do you think, just from a systematic standpoint, from what you've seen, where have you seen growth in his game?
So I think you have to look at things from a different lens when you're talking about going against backups. One of the things, like college football, the video game just came out a month ago, and everybody was super excited about it. But if I beat a team 118-10 playing on varsity and then go to and somebody else does the same thing at All-American, it's going to be way more impressive at that harder difficulty level, which is essentially what we're talking about in the preseason. And you're not even playing with like good playbooks. You're playing with all basic stuff. Brian Flores isn't doing any of his sicko stuff. He doesn't want to put that on film. Right. Guess what? You're going to play cover 1. Guess what? You're going to play quarters. And it's all basic. Yeah, they throw in some basic blitzes. They're essentially using a Madden playbook without a lot of the nuance and keys because they don't want to show anything. So you have to look at it with a grain of salt. So how I look at some of these things is I look at process. How is Jaren Hall utilizing his process against the defense? How is he navigating the pocket? How is he feeling comfortable? How is he doing all these things, Judd? That to me is the most important. How is he going about his job? Is he doing the right things? Is he making the proper reads? Not, hey, is he just making all kinds of elite throws and just carving up the competition? Right. If you're Jaren Hall and what the Vikings had from him last year, like especially I look back at the Falcons game, he did a really good job in those 2 drives to move the Vikings down the field, make good, crisp, clean decisions, and things look good. And then he got the concussion. So we'll never truly kind of figure out what that path could have looked like if he didn't get hurt, because Dobbs mania began. But that's kind of the idea of what I'm looking for. I want to look at how you go through your process. He did throw that interception, was called back on the illegal contact. Yep. But the decision was good. The throw wasn't. And it looked to me like it was poor mechanics, where the reason why the ball sailed, because he hit the hole right. He had the accuracy down, just not the placement. And what I mean by that is the angle in which he threw the ball. He threw it right at the receiver. He just threw it way too high. And you can't do that in the NFL. And it's still a bad throw. But the decision and the process to make the decision to throw the ball there was good. It was a dagger concept. So you've got the inside guy running a go route, the outside guy running a dig behind it. That gap is almost always clear. Like, you just always hit the dig on dagger. And if for some reason that safety wants to crash, guess what? You got a go route over the top. Right. Happy Christmas, everybody. So I like to see that kind of process. I thought he did a really good job of navigating the pocket. And it got muddy at times, but he did a good job rolling out, trying to find guys down the field. The touchdown to Tristan Jackson was just basic football. Slant flat concept. So in this, the flat guy can be a receiver, tight end, fullback, running back. So they're out of the shotgun. The running back is running to the flat. The inside linebacker has to chase the running back because it's his responsibility. So what Hall does is he waits in the pocket for that linebacker to clear the window, hits Tristan Jackson, easy touchdown. He didn't rush it. Against the Raiders, he probably rushes that throw because it looked like he was just playing out of his mind. And what I mean by out of his mind is he was playing pressed. He was playing nervous. He was playing like he was scared to lose his job. And then once the JJ McCarthy injury happened, the Browns game, he played like he had already had his job. He played like he is guaranteed to win the roster spot. And he's like, now I'm gunning for QB2. That's kind of how I saw his play. I don't think he's QB2. I think he's securely QB3 at this point. But looking at how he's going about his business, how he's going about his process has evolved so much from that first preseason game where it looked like he was scared to lose his job. Once he figured out he's in a more comfortable spot, it all clicked, and he was utilizing that good process to make good decisions and good plays down the field. And I still feel really comfortable about him on a long-term basis being the backup for this franchise.
So the 53-man is going to be set tomorrow. I believe it's 3 p.m. Central on Tuesday that the final roster, or at least the initial version of it, has to be set. The Vikings have cut some guys already today. No huge names there. But I want to talk to you about the defensive tackles because you sent us a note about that. They kept 5 a year ago. I think I'm projecting that they will keep 5. But what do you think about a defensive tackle core, which really runs the gamut age-wise? You got some veterans, you got some young guys, you got Roy, who I went into training camp thinking had a chance to battle for a starting job, and now I don't have him making the roster because his training camp was not good. He certainly didn't flash. So what do you think about the defensive tackle position as we approach the witching hour for cuts?
It's such a weird position, Judd. I think there is one bona fide starter on this team. That's Harrison Phillips.
Okay.
I think there are 6 guys that you feel good about as backup rotational players. It's a very interesting dynamic. You want to have more guys that you view at a higher end. The Vikings just don't have that. They prioritize other positions. They really fortified linebacker. They rebuilt their edge room, and I think it's better than last year, mainly because the fit with how Brian Flores wants to play is better. And the defensive back room, look, it's not a sexy corner room. It's a solid corner room. And you can win football games with that. You have arguably the best safety room in the National Football League. So when you kind of piece it all together, the Vikings were the 13th best defense and the 17th best scoring defense with a bad defensive line. Why are things going to change now? And with this group, I think you have interesting players that can give you some upside, like a Jerry Tillery. He's built like a defensive lineman that you want to rush the passer with. He's got the athleticism. He just hasn't been able to put it together. Well, maybe in certain packages with how Flores wants to attack, maybe he can finally reach some of that. I don't think he's even going to become close to like the Pro Bowl level player you'd want a first-round pick to be, which is what he was. But I think if you can get him to be a Jonathan Bullard level player, I think you're happy with that. And Bullard is a guy I probably wouldn't prefer to start, but I'm fine with it. I'd like him to be my first guy off the bench, my guy to come in and play 30 to 40 snaps a game and be a really solid run defender with a little bit of pass rush use, which is what he is. It's the guys after that that really intrigue me. And I know he did not make the final cuts for Mr. Mankato, Judd, and I'm going to be honest, I'm a little upset by it. Jalen Redmond should be on the Mr. Mankato list. And I'm going to tell you why.
It was a lot. It was tough, man. It was a tough cut down. A lot of fighting.
Big Leg Bill got cut. Like there were some pretty big names that got cut.
I know. And I'm going to make the case for Redmond. And he had 3 really, really good preseason games. Looked good in the practices I was able to see. And one of the things that I think is really tough for a list like this isn't, and this is why I think Judd's camp notes and stuff like this is really important when having this conversation. You don't get a lot of stuff on the stat sheet when you're a guy like Jalen Redmond and how he's been playing. What you do get is accentuating other people's stat lines. He's doing the dirty work. He's doing the grimy stuff. He is launching himself so guys can be loopers on stunts. He is two-gapping and holding up at the point of attack to stop guys in the gap in the running game. He's not always getting those tackles, but he is the catalyst behind a lot of this really good defensive play. And Levi Drake Rodriguez has been phenomenal. I think he should be on the list.
Yeah.
But
you cut that list down.
Yeah. And Redmond is just doing so much of the grimy stuff. If the Vikings keep him, I wouldn't be shocked. He did not make my final 53, but he was very close. And I think that because of how he's playing, I think he's getting a little bit overlooked for an award like this, because a lot of this, from my perspective, Judd, is about flash. You got to flash. You got to be
100%.
the sexy guy.
Yeah.
Redmond is the epitome of what meat and potatoes is.
Yeah.
He's
so
not
he's the meat and potatoes, Mr. Mankato. We'll give him that award.
There we go.
For this show.
Brand new.
I think Jalen Naylor should ultimately win the award, and I think it should be pretty much a runaway. But I'm going to fight for Jalen Redmond to be on the ballot. And you have Taki Taimani, who I think has put together a couple really good games, flashed a little bit during practice for me. He's a nose guy, and he can two gap. He can move the pocket. He can hold himself up at the point of attack and get penetration and make plays in the run and pass game. 95,000 fully guaranteed as a UDFA Jed. That tells me that he's going to be more likely to make the roster than a lot of these other bubble guys, because there's investment. Money means investment. Money means belief. And having that is so important when it comes to making the roster, because if I believed in you then, why wouldn't I believe in you now? It's not like a guy like Redmond, who they signed, they gave no guaranteed money to, where it's essentially, you got to make me believe. Mm-hmm. Make me believe that angels are real. And I think he did that. But if he would have started out with the same investment as Taimani, I think we're having a little bit of a different conversation surrounding Redmond.
Sure.
And these guys on the defensive line have proved a lot. And I would be worried to put any of them through waivers. Now, only like 4 to 6 guys usually get claimed. Sometimes it's lower than that. Sometimes a little higher, but not a lot of guys get claimed because there's over 1,100 players
this is why you can waive
that get waived. But if they played that well, that consistently during the preseason, do you want to take that chance? Do you want to risk it? It wouldn't be surprising to me if the Vikings decided to keep 7 defensive linemen on the 53 initially, and then after waivers go, then they put them out there, because teams who have already built their practice squads, they'll have already added all the guys onto their active roster that they're going to. And maybe that's how you sneak some of these guys back onto the practice squads. You don't have to worry as much about waivers, because teams will be worried more about what's on the roster, and maybe you can sneak them in. Mm-hmm. But it's a good problem to have, guys that you believe in, guys that you can trust to do a bunch of different things. I don't know if any of them become high-level starters, but depth is good.
Yeah. And Forno, I know you mentioned that you have your 53-man roster set, correct?
Yeah, I do. It's up at AZsports.com.
Perfect. And for everybody that maybe hasn't checked it out yet, give me one guy that is like maybe your dark horse that could surprise. You mentioned the Flash. That's Flash in preseason, Flash in training camp. Who's Flash that's maybe a dark horse to make that final roster that'll surprise some people? Or even the flip side of that, somebody who has not been flashing, somebody that's been kind of falling off the pedestal, who it might be a surprise cut.
Well, let's start with the guy who I have on my final 53-man roster, and it's not necessarily for the reason you think. Linebacker Dallas Gant made my final 53. Okay. And I thought he played relatively well at linebacker, but I'm not keeping him because he's playing well at linebacker. I'm keeping him because I'm going to have him as the core special teamer like Najee Thompson was supposed to be. Gant played nearly 1,000 snaps as special teams at college, started at Ohio State as a 4-star recruit, transferred to Toledo for his final 2 years, where he was first team All-MAC both years. I think you can have Gant as your special teams guy, and I think he's capable enough at linebacker where if you have to throw him in, you don't love it, but I don't think he's going to be a disaster.
He's Troy Dye.
Yeah. I think he's your Troy Dye. And that would be the one guy where, hey, maybe he does make the roster because of that special teams utility. If you're going to be on the back end of the roster, you better play special teams, which is why I think Lewis Cine might feel a little bit in trouble. The one guy where I'm just not convinced he makes the roster, Jonah Williams. I never really saw anything with Jonah Williams to say, hey, I need to have that guy on my team. He didn't play a lot in preseason, but how much of that was because the coaching staff already felt he made the team, how much
Because
of
he got
that was
first team in practice. That's where I base mine on.
A lot of guys were getting first team in practice is kind of my theory here. I don't know. I didn't see nearly enough where I feel comfortable that he should make the roster, but he is a former LA Rams guy. Kevin O'Connell, Wes Phillips, they obviously have some form of relationship with him, even though they're both offensive coaches. So maybe he does make the roster. I'm not convinced because especially with how these other guys have been playing. And as you've said before, Judd, it's not always about how you play. It's also about how you practice.
Yeah.
The practices I saw, he was just the guy. I didn't see him flash once. And sometimes it's better that you're just not a catastrophe and that you're just holding up at the point of attack and you're just a guy, I guess. But I'm not convinced that he's worth keeping over some of these other guys that have really shown an aptitude for having a lot of potential.
All right, before we go to the Purple Daily on Draft portion of the Meat and Potatoes program, I want to give a quick shout out to the exclusive personal injury law firm of this show, Nicolay Law. They know that when you or a loved one gets injured, ordinary life, it can come to a stop and things can get complicated. During that time, insurance companies are likely to pressure you. They don't care if you get better. They don't care if the bills are piling up. They don't care that you may not be able to work. But Nicolay Law and Russ, who you are looking at right there, he does care. They've seen every play the insurance companies have, and they will make sure you get the compensation that you deserve after an accident. So if you've been injured, get Minnesota's local award-winning injury lawyers. Get Nicolay. Start your path to winning at NicolayLaw.com. That's NICOLET law.com, or give them a call, 1-855-NICOLAY, 1-855-NICOLAY. Russ and his team are outstanding and will take care of you. All right, week 0 is done in college football, Forno. We are now into you talk about meat and potatoes. Well, Saturday it starts. Forno will not sleep. He won't talk to his wife. He'll ignore the dogs because what he has is college football. Tying it back to this show, and this is a service to me and AJ as well. Give me some Vikings prospects to watch. So some guys that you think positionally, cornerbacks, defensive tackles, where they are going to look to add. Who should we be watching for on Saturday as college football gets underway with a full schedule?
God bless my wife for that planning.
Oh, she's a saint.
She's
a saint, dude.
Here's the best part. She doesn't even have to deal with me this weekend because she'll be in Arizona visiting her sister because her sister just bought a house. So she's
marrying me is tough. Marrying you would be damn near impossible. Like, you're more psycho than I am, and I'm weird.
God bless my wife.
Yep, exactly right.
Shout out. She's an incredible person, and she is genuinely smarter than me, which I'm not a person that likes to boast and brag, but I've got a high
wife.
IQ.
If you marry a woman who's not as smart as you, what are you doing?
Hey, my wife got it. My wife earned her doctorate at 24. She is smart.
My wife runs circles around my smart, so I'm cool with that. And someday, he will get married, and guess what? She'll be smarter than him too. So, and she certainly won't allow you to play the sport of wiffle ball, AJ. All right,
or she'll be able to fix the shoulder without going to the doctor.
No, she'll just yank the cord on his sports career, which is absolutely fine.
Just ixnay on the wiffle ball.
What are we looking for? What are you going to be watching when you put your purple colored glasses on Saturday, Forno?
So let's start with just from a complete draft perspective. You got to tune in Thursday night. Yeah, the Gophers play North Carolina. No, don't watch that game.
Hold on. I'm actually going to take notes. Okay.
Watch Colorado versus North Dakota State.
Okay.
Deion Sanders' kid, Shadur Sanders, quarterback, senior at Colorado.
Yep.
Had some flashes last year, but there were some real inconsistencies. Here's the big thing. The offense that Sean Lewis ran at Colorado was based on choice routes. So think of like the old school run and shoot. Think of the routes that Kevin O'Connell really likes to have Jefferson and Hawkinson run, where, hey, you have this leverage, I'm going to cut this way. Or you're playing deep, I'm going to stop. You're playing too shallow, I'm going to take you over the top. Like, everything is dependent on what the defender is doing. Sanders was really hesitant in throwing a lot of choice routes because so much of that is based on timing and chemistry, and he didn't like them. So they moved on from Lewis. I believe Pat Shurmur is the offensive coordinator now. And there are going to be a lot less choice routes, a lot more just core concepts where you can go 1 to 2 to 3. And I think that's going to really elevate his game because you're taking away something where he's not comfortable. And you got to make your quarterback comfortable. he is a top recruit coming out of high school. He's a top quarterback prospect coming into this class. And NDSU is a weird team. They have a history of beating FBS opponents. They have won, I believe it's 6 or 7 national titles since 2011. They're a powerhouse in the world of FCS football. Now, SDSU is kind of taking a little bit of that, but they could go into Boulder and they could get the win. Colorado's they started out as a 7-point favorite. I believe it's up to 9.5 because people are betting the farm on Dion because, well, it's Dion. Right. And Sanders is going to be a guy to watch. The other team that I recommend everybody watch all season long. I don't care about the Michigan offense. Watch the Michigan defense. Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham on the interior of that defensive line. Mason Graham is more of the meat and potatoes kind of defender, where Kenneth Grant is the freak. We're talking a guy who hit almost 19 miles an hour on the GPS at 350 pounds.
Well, that's ridiculous.
If he can put it all together, Judd, he could be a top 5 pick in this class. Kind of gives me some vibes of, you remember Dontari Poe coming out of college, got drafted by Kansas City, was viewed as a huge boom or bust prospect because he was so huge, so athletic, but just wasn't quite able to put it all together in college. And you were wondering, is he going to be able to do it in the league? He didn't. He was a successful pro for a while. I think that's kind of the mold of what Kenneth Grant is right now. Can he put it all together? Can he be that guy that you want to take in the top half of the draft? I think the answer is going to be yes, but we'll find out. But that defense is excellent. Plus, you have Will Johnson, the cornerback on the outside, who's viewed by a lot of people as a top 3 player in this draft. I've seen him on boards as number 1. And cornerback is a position of need for the Vikings.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how Kwesi Ofamensa is going to view corner. My perspective right now is that he views corner as a weak link system and does not need to have elite level talent. Just needs to have high floor players that can basically do the job. He doesn't need to have a Pat Surtain. He doesn't need to have a Sauce Gardner. Just be a good player. And that's kind of how the room is built currently. So I don't know if that's going to be a priority in round 1. But if it is, I'm not going to complain about it because getting good corners is always a good thing. Yes. So those would be the guys to watch. And then for all the late night sickos out there, God bless college football for starting games at 9:30 p.m. or later. Arizona's a team to watch. Tetairoa McMillan. I'm going to shout his praises.
Wait, who?
Tetairoa McMillan. Tetairoa. He's from Hawaii. My brother-in-law is also from Hawaii. So I asked him, how do you pronounce his name? And he's still like, I don't know. I haven't seen a single pronunciation guide with his name. So I genuinely don't know how to actually say it.
Good luck, broadcaster.
So Tetairoa McMillan is how I'm saying it until I'm corrected. Otherwise, please, if you know, correct me. I want to be right on this. But he is essentially, if you took DeAndre Hopkins, gave him 3 inches and speed, that is how he plays the game. He's so smooth in how he moves across the field. He catches the ball in stride. He's got the ability to leap. He's got a huge catch radius because of his long arms and size. He could go top 10 and it wouldn't surprise me. And I may love receivers, which I admit that I do, but I would pound the table for the Vikings to get a player like this because you know what the Vikings don't have? Size. You know what they have? Quickness and precise route running. Right. You want a guy to go be an alpha who can also do a little bit of that?
Right.
Get a guy like McMillan. Well, they don't make guys like this very often anymore.
That's an intriguing thought too, because you could make a case that there is real concern and that there should be now within the Vikings about Jordan. Because I mean, 1, speeding thing is a problem. 2, when you were, it sounds like allegedly intoxicated, is a major problem decision making. So Addison has great talent. I'm not questioning his talent, but I am saying your point is interesting because it wouldn't hurt to get a really good 3 who could bump up to a 2 if Addison eventually works his way off the roster because they can't trust him. So that is, and you got a head coach who is never going to say, you know what, I don't need more skill position offensive players. So I think you might be onto something there. Like defensive tackle and cornerback, I think are positions of need. But if you're like reverse engineering how the head coach thinks, I think you're probably right. So that is very, very intriguing. All right, let's go to the final segment, which is going to be AJ and the questions for for Forno that are all going to be just meat and potatoes questions.
Yeah, meat and potatoes questions here. Make sure if you do want to get yours read on the show and asked to Forno, email in at pdmeatandpotatoes@gmail.com. First one here coming from Sam. Sam wants to know if there's anyone in preseason, Forno, that you've seen battling for a job that has been maybe executing the game plan better than most, or on the other side of the ball, somebody who you thought has been, should be up to speed, but has really just been looking like they're playing in quicksand almost.
So the one guy that I would talk about, Jaren Hall. I thought, and we already talked about him, so I kind of won't go super in depth on that. His process has just been good. He's been making really good reads, and he's playing within the system really well. The other guy that I've been really impressed with, I like Jalen Redmond. I think Redmond's been really solid. He's been doing all the dirty work. He hasn't been put into the ground. He's just been a consistent player. Him and Levi Drake Rodriguez, just the interior of that line has just been so exciting from a depth perspective that you don't necessarily get from like other guys on this team. And then I got to say, on the other end of the spectrum, Jay Ward's been a disaster at corner. And I think it was a great idea to put him there. I advocated to give him a shot because he played outside corner at LSU and looked pretty solid. But it hasn't worked. And that's okay. He's just a safety in the NFL. Maybe he can play in the slot, but he's not an outside corner.
And he's back in safety now.
It was a great try. You needed bodies. Hey, this guy's got experience. Let's see what he can do. And you know what? Unfortunately, it might cost him his job. But what's really going to cost him his job is his just absolute catastrophic tackling in the Cleveland game. You can't be that bad of a tackler and play in this defense.
All right.
All right, next one comes from Connor. Connor sent me like a paragraph about how he's in a fantasy football mindset. He's getting ready for the draft, and on his fantasy football mind is TJ Hawkinson. He's already questioning what he wants to do at tight end, but he's thinking with TJ Hawkinson set to potentially be on that IR start, like he's going to be on the side here for the season for the Vikings to begin. He's curious though, does that change like the role of tight end within the Vikings without a TJ Hawkinson? How much involvement does that maybe take away because it's such a steep drop off from TJ Hawkinson to either a Johnny Munter or Oliver? What are your thoughts there? And just how does maybe Kevin O'Connell adjust to either continue to feed that position or neglect it entirely?
I don't think a ton is going to change as far as usage is concerned. I think they're going to be running the same kind of routes. They're going to be doing the same things that Hawkinson did. Think of it this way. Johnny Munt is a Dollar General version of TJ Hawkinson. You're not going to get the high-end play, but you're going to get the same style of play. It's like getting Maruchan ramen versus going to Moto Eye downtown. Just you're getting ramen, but one is significantly better than the other.
It's the same, but it's not. Yeah.
Yeah. Josh Oliver's going to do his thing. He's going to be that sixth tackle. He's going to get the ball in the flat. He's going to run a few routes, catch like 20, 25 balls, but he's not going to be a focal point. I think Munt is going to be the guy that is in the TJ Hawkinson role. And I hope Nick Muse gets a chance because I've been really impressed with him throughout the course of camp in the preseason. But I don't think much changes. And when it comes to fantasy football, Connor, the big thing you got to remember, you don't draft for weeks 1 to 4. You draft to win. You draft for the playoffs. So if you think Hawkinson is going to be fully healthy and be impactful in weeks like 10 to 18, you take Hawkinson and you just deal with the scrap heap at tight end until then.
All right. Well, that's all I got for you.
Perfect. Yeah, you play to win the fantasy league. You do not play to win week 1. You play to win the championship. All right. Great stuff, man. We will talk to you next week. AJ, I'm Judd. He is Tyler Forness. Check out his stuff. A to Z Sports. Fantastic work. Meat and potatoes. We'll see you in a week.